The Boy Who Stole the Moon. In a small village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there lived a boy named Kofi. Kofi was no ordinary boy. He was known throughout the village for his insatiable curiosity and boundless imagination. While other children played games and did chores, Kofi spent his days dreaming of the impossible. He wanted to do something that no one had ever done before. He wanted to steal the moon. Every night, as the village slept, Kofi would sit by the riverbank and stare up at the sky. The moon, with its glowing light and mysterious aura, fascinated him. He often wondered what it would be like to hold the moon in his hands, to feel its cool, silvery surface. The idea consumed him, and soon he became determined to make his dream a reality. One evening, as the moon hung low in the sky, Kofi devised a plan. He had heard tales of a powerful sorcerer who lived deep in the forest, a man who was said to possess magical powers that could bend the very fabric of nature. Kofi decided that he would seek out this sorcerer and ask for his help in stealing the moon. Early the next morning, Kofi set out on his journey. He walked for hours, the forest growing thicker and darker with each step. The trees whispered secrets to one another, and strange animals watched him with glowing eyes. But Kofi was not afraid. His determination was stronger than his fear. After what seemed like an eternity, Kofi came upon a clearing in the forest. In the center of the clearing stood a small hut, smoke curling from its chimney. Kofi knew that this must be the home of the sorcerer. He approached the hut and knocked on the door. The door creaked open, and an old man with a long, white beard and piercing eyes stepped out. He studied Kofi for a moment before speaking. "What brings you to my home, young one?" the sorcerer asked in a voice that seemed to echo through the trees. Kofi bowed respectfully. "Great sorcerer," he began, "I have come to ask for your help. I want to steal the moon." The sorcerer raised an eyebrow in surprise. "The moon? Why would you want to steal the moon?" Kofi looked up at the sky, where the sun was beginning to set. "The moon is so beautiful," he said. "I want to hold it in my hands, to keep it as my own. No one has ever done such a thing before." The sorcerer stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Stealing the moon is no small feat, boy. It requires great power and even greater wisdom. But I see that your heart is pure, and your desire is true. I will help you." The sorcerer led Kofi into his hut, where shelves lined with jars of strange potions and ancient books covered the walls. He reached for a dusty, leather-bound tome and began to chant in a language that Kofi did not understand. The room filled with a soft, blue light, and Kofi felt a strange energy course through his body. Finally, the sorcerer closed the book and turned to Kofi. "I have given you the power to reach the moon," he said. "But beware, for this power comes with a great responsibility. If you steal the moon, the night will be plunged into darkness, and the balance of the world will be disturbed. You must decide if your desire is worth the consequences." Kofi nodded, his mind made up. He thanked the sorcerer and left the hut, eager to put his plan into action. That night, as the moon rose high in the sky, Kofi returned to the riverbank. He closed his eyes and focused on the power that the sorcerer had bestowed upon him. He felt himself growing lighter and lighter, until he was no longer standing on the ground. He was floating, rising higher and higher into the sky. Soon, Kofi was soaring among the stars, the moon shining brightly before him. He reached out and touched its surface, feeling the cool, smooth texture beneath his fingers. With a deep breath, Kofi wrapped his arms around the moon and began to pull it from the sky. At first, the moon resisted, as if it were anchored to the heavens. But Kofi's determination was unyielding, and slowly, the moon began to move. Inch by inch, Kofi pulled the moon closer to him, until it was cradled in his arms. The night was immediately plunged into darkness. The stars flickered and dimmed, and the forest below fell silent. Kofi paid no attention to the world around him. He was too mesmerized by the sight of the moon in his hands. It was even more beautiful up close, its light casting a soft glow on his face. But as Kofi marveled at his prize, he began to feel a strange unease. The air around him grew heavy, and the once calm forest now seemed menacing. The animals that had watched him from the shadows were now restless, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The trees groaned and creaked, as if they were straining against some invisible force. Kofi realized that something was terribly wrong. The sorcerer's warning echoed in his mind. If you steal the moon, the night will be plunged into darkness, and the balance of the world will be disturbed. Panic set in as Kofi looked down at the moon in his hands. It was growing heavier, its light dimming. The darkness that had settled over the land seemed to seep into his very soul, and for the first time, Kofi felt the weight of his actions. Desperate to set things right, Kofi decided to return the moon to its place in the sky. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't lift it. The moon had become impossibly heavy, and Kofi's strength was failing him. Just as he was about to give up, Kofi remembered the sorcerer's words, great power and even greater wisdom. He realized that the power to steal the moon was not enough. He needed the wisdom to understand the consequences of his actions. With this newfound understanding, Kofi closed his eyes and focused on the connection between the moon and the world below. He thought of the village, of the people who depended on the light of the moon to guide them through the night. He thought of the animals that relied on the moon's cycles to survive. He thought of the balance that held the world together. As Kofi's thoughts aligned with the natural order, he felt the moon begin to lighten in his arms. Slowly, the darkness that had enveloped the world began to recede, and the stars grew brighter. The moon's light returned, stronger than before, and Kofi was able to lift it once more. With all his might, Kofi pushed the moon back into the sky. It slid into place, its light shining down on the world below. The forest sighed in relief, and the animals settled back into the peaceful slumber. The balance had been restored. Exhausted but relieved, Kofi floated back down to the riverbank. He collapsed onto the ground, his heart heavy with the lessons he had learned. The moon now hung high in the sky, its light a constant reminder of the power and responsibility that came with his actions. Kofi returned to the village the next morning, humbled by his experience. He no longer dreamed of stealing the moon or achieving the impossible. Instead, he focused on using his curiosity and imagination to help others, to understand the world around him, and to find balance in all things. Years passed, and Kofi grew into a wise and respected elder of the village. He often told the story of how he had stolen the moon, and the children would listen in awe, their eyes wide with wonder. But Kofi always ended the story with a lesson, that true power lies not in the ability to take what we desire, but in the wisdom to understand the consequences of our actions and the courage to set things right. Answer: the tale of the boy who stole the moon became a legend, passed down from generation to generation, a reminder of the delicate balance that holds the world together and the importance of wisdom and